If you enjoy these deep dives into the hidden history of the Cold War and the secrets buried in our own backyards, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. In the autumn of 1979, the suburbs of Northern Virginia were a facade of manicured lawns and quiet driveways, concealing the anxious pulse of a capital city locked in a global standoff. McLean was not just a neighborhood, it was a dormitory for the intelligence community. Men in gray suits drove sedans to Langley, and their wives hosted garden parties where the conversation never strayed too close to the specifics of the office. It was a world of unspoken rules, and for a man like Elias Thorne, it was simply a place where the pay was good and the masonry work was steady. Elias was 52 years old, a man with hands roughened by 3 decades of handling limestone and brick. He was not a spy. He was not a diplomat. He was a master mason who understood the integrity of a structure better than he understood the geopolitical shifting of the world. He worked alone, preferred the silence of his trade, and had a reputation for discretion, which was a valuable currency in McLean. When a homeowner needed a wall built or a patio laid, they didn't just pay for the stone. They paid for Elias not to look through the windows. On October 14th, Elias received a work order from a property management firm based in D.C. The job was at a colonial revival on Chainbridge Road. The house had been sitting empty for nearly 8 months, caught in the slow, grinding gears of probate and foreclosure. The bank wanted the retaining wall in the backyard repaired, and the large hearth in the living room inspected for structural damage before the property could be listed for auction. When Elias arrived at the property, the morning mist was still clinging to the Potomac River Valley. The house had the hollow, abandoned feeling of a place that had been left in a hurry. Leaves from the previous autumn were piled against the front door, and the windows were dark eyes staring out at the street. He had the key, provided by the bank, but as he turned the lock, he felt a strange resistance, a heaviness that had nothing to do with the mechanism. The interior was a time capsule. The furniture was still there, draped in dust sheets that looked like ghosts standing in the dim light. There were magazines on the coffee table dated February 1979. A child's bicycle was leaning against the staircase banister. It wasn't unusual for foreclosures to have items left behind, but this was different. Usually, people took the small things, the photos, the heirlooms, the papers. Here it looked as if the occupants, a family named the Vances, had simply evaporated while the kettle was boiling. Elias set his heavy canvas tool bag on the floor of the living room. His boots crunched on a layer of dust. He wasn't there to ask questions about the Vances. He was there to fix the fireplace. The work order stated that there was a draft and some loose masonry on the western side of the massive stone hearth. It was the centerpiece of the room, a grand structure built from Pennsylvania fieldstone. As he knelt before the cold grate, turning on his flashlight, Elias ran his hand over the mortar joints. He knew stone. He knew how it settled, how it breathed. And as his fingers traced the edge of the mantel, he realized something that a layman would have missed. The soot pattern was wrong, and the mortar on the right-hand pillar of the fireplace was a slightly different shade of gray, a mix that had been applied years after the original construction, by a hand that was skilled, but not quite as skilled as the original mason. Masonry is a language of weight and balance. Every stone relies on the one below it. When Elias began to tap the stones with the handle of his trowel, listening for the density of the material, the room fell into a rhythmic silence. Thud, thud, thud. Then, on the third stone up from the hearth on the right side, the sound changed. Tick. It wasn't hollow exactly. It was distinct. The vibration traveled differently. Elias frowned, adjusting his work light. He scraped away a layer of soot and dust. The pointing, the mortar between the stones, looked solid, but when he applied pressure with a chisel, it didn't chip away in chunks like aged lime mortar. It crumbled like a synthetic compound, something mixed with epoxy. He shouldn't have been curious. His contract was to repair, not to demolish. But the structural integrity was his responsibility. If there was a void behind that stone, the whole chimney could be compromised. He took his mallet and gave the chisel a sharp tap. The mortar gave way far too easily. It wasn't structural, it was cosmetic. Elias worked the stone loose. It was a heavy piece of granite, roughly the size of a loaf of bread. As he wiggled it free from the wall, the smell of stale, trapped air drifted out, a scent of old paper and dry rot. He pulled the stone out and set it on the drop cloth. Behind it was not the rough brick of the chimney flue, but a manufactured space. A box, welded from galvanized steel, had been mortared into the cavity of the chimney. It was fitted with a padlock, but the hasp had been cut, or perhaps never locked in the first place. Elias sat back on his heels, the silence of the house pressing against his ears. He looked around the empty living room, half expecting someone to walk in and ask him what he was doing. But there was only the dust and the faint hum of a refrigerator running in the kitchen. He reached into the dark hole and pulled the metal box out. It was heavy, cold, and entirely out of place. This was not a wall safe for jewelry. It was an industrial lockbox, painted a dull olive drab. There were no markings on the outside. He placed it on the floor. The lid was hinged. With a deep breath that tasted of dust and apprehension, Elias lifted the lid. Inside, there was no gold, no jewelry. There were 3 items: a thick, leather-bound ledger, a stack of reel-to-reel audio tapes, and a manila envelope that was sealed with red wax. Elias was a bricklayer. He built walls to define spaces, to keep the weather out and the warmth in. He had never been a man to pry, but he knew the name on the work order, Jonathan Vance. He knew from the neighbor's chatter he'd overheard while unloading his truck that Vance worked for the Department of Agriculture, a common euphemism in this part of Virginia. He opened the ledger. He expected financial records, perhaps hidden assets to explain the foreclosure. What he found were columns of dates, times, and coordinates. And in the margins, written in a tight, precise hand, were notes. August 12th, contact established. The architect is nervous. September 4th, drop verified. Package contains the schematics for Project Echo. October 1st, they know. We have to accelerate the timeline. Elias closed the book. His heart was hammering a rhythm against his ribs that felt dangerously fast. He wasn't reading a diary. He was holding the reason why the house was empty. Elias did not take the box home. That felt like theft. Instead, he hid it in the bottom of his tool bag and continued his work on the fireplace, mechanically mixing mortar and setting stones, his mind racing. He needed to understand the context of what he had found before he decided who to call. At lunch, he walked to the deli 3 blocks away. It was a local spot where blue-collar workers and white-collar bureaucrats stood in the same line for pastrami. Elias sat in a booth near the window, watching the street. He found himself looking at the cars passing by, unremarkable sedans, delivery trucks, and wondering if any of them were watching the house on Chain Bridge Road. He needed information. He remembered the woman next door, the one who had been watching him from her porch when he arrived, Mrs. Gable. She looked like the neighborhood historian, the kind of woman who knew exactly when trash day was and whose husband was drinking too much. When Elias returned to the site, Mrs. Gable was in her garden, deadheading roses with aggressive precision. He approached the fence, wiping his hands on a rag. "Afternoon, ma'am," Elias said, keeping his voice casual. She looked up, adjusting her glasses. "You're the mason, finally fixing that eyesore of a wall?" "Doing my best," Elias said, "though the house seems in rough shape inside. Shame to see a family place go empty like that." "Did the Vances move far?" Mrs. Gable snorted, snipping a rose head. "Move? That's a polite way of putting it. They vanished." Elias leaned against the fence. "Vanished?" "February," she said, lowering her shears. "One day Jonathan is washing his car in the driveway. Sarah, that's his wife, is unloading groceries. The kids were playing in the yard. Next morning, gone. No moving truck, no goodbye. The lights were on in the kitchen for 3 days before the police came to do a welfare check." "That's unusual," Elias said. "This is McLean," Mrs. Gable said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Unusual is normal here. People get posted overseas. They get reassigned. But usually there's a moving van. Usually they don't leave the dog." Elias froze. "They left the dog?" "Poor thing was barking its head off in the backyard. Animal control took it. The police said they went to Switzerland for an emergency posting. Urgent diplomatic business. That was the official line. But I saw the men who came later." "What men?" "Suits. Not police. They came at night, a week after the Vances left." went through the house with flashlights, took boxes out the back door. They weren't movers. They were sweepers. Elias thanked her and walked back to the house. The sweepers had missed something. They had missed the stone in the fireplace. He went back inside and locked the front door. He took the box out of his bag again. He needed to look closer. If the CIA, or whoever Vance worked for, had swept the house and they hadn't found this, then whatever was in this box wasn't meant for the agency. It was something Vance had hidden from them, or perhaps for them, but he hadn't had the chance to retrieve it. He opened the manila envelope. Inside was a passport. It was American, issued to Jonathan Vance, but beneath it was another passport. This one was dark blue, a Canadian passport, issued to a man named Thomas Walker, but the photo was clearly Jonathan Vance, and beneath that, a single sheet of paper with a list of names. At the top of the list, circled in red ink, was a name that Elias recognized from the newspapers, a name that had been associated with a recent trade delegation from the Soviet Union. Viktor Petrov. The weight of the box felt heavier as the afternoon wore on. Elias knew he had to finish the job. If he left the fireplace unfinished, the bank's inspector would notice. He worked with a strange, frantic energy, rebuilding the internal structure of the hearth, sealing the cavity where the box had been. He made the new mortar match the old perfectly. He erased the hiding spot. If anyone came looking now, they would see only solid stone. He took the box to his truck, wrapping it in a greasy drop cloth and shoving it under the passenger seat. As he drove away from Chain Bridge Road, the paranoia that had been a low hum in the back of his mind began to amplify. Elias lived in a small clapboard house in Alexandria, miles away from the manicured secrets of McLean. He lived alone. His wife had passed 5 years prior, and his children were grown and moved to Ohio. His house was his sanctuary, but as he carried the metal box into his kitchen, he felt like he was bringing a disease inside. He placed the box on his Formica table and poured himself a glass of whiskey. He needed to think. The rational part of him said to call the police, but Mrs. Gable's story about the sweepers stopped him. If Vance was CIA, the police were just local maintenance. They wouldn't know what to do. And if Vance was a traitor, Elias looked at the reel-to-reel tapes. He possessed an old player in the basement, a relic from the 60s. He used to listen to music. He went downstairs, the wooden steps creaking, and retrieved the dusty machine. He brought it up, plugged it in, and threaded the first tape. The magnetic ribbon spun. For 10 seconds, there was only static. Then, a voice. It was a man's voice, Jonathan Vance. He sounded tired, his voice tight with stress. Entry 44, date, January 14th, 1979. They are pressing for the identity of the asset in Kabul. I told them I don't have access. Petrov doesn't believe me. He showed me the photos of Sarah taking the children to school. He showed me the photos of my father in the nursing home. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of proximity. A pause. The sound of a lighter clicking. A deep inhale. I thought I could manage this. I thought I was feeding them chicken feed. Disinformation. But the feedback loop is closing. The agency suspects a leak in the Near East Division. I sat in a meeting today with the director, and he looked right at me when he said it. We have a rot in the floorboards. I am the rot. Elias stopped the tape. The room felt suddenly very cold. Vance wasn't just a spy, he was a double agent, or at least a compromised one. He was being blackmailed by the KGB, Petrov, while trying to maintain his cover at the CIA. The tape continued. I have prepared the package, the lifeboat. If we have to run, I need leverage. I have the transcripts of the erratic communications. I have the proof that the leak didn't start with me. It started higher. If I can get this to the Inspector General, maybe we survive. If I give it to Petrov, we survive, but we are owned forever. I am hiding this where no one looks, in the foundation. Elias stared at the spinning reels. Vance hadn't run to Switzerland. He had been preparing to make a deal, but with whom? And why did he leave the leverage behind? The realization hit Elias like a physical blow. Vance hadn't left the leverage behind because he forgot it. He left it behind because he was taken before he could get to it. 2 days passed. Elias didn't go back to the Chain Bridge house. He called the property manager and claimed he needed to source a specific type of limestone to match the existing hearth, buying himself time. He couldn't sleep. The box sat in his basement, inside an old chest freezer that didn't work, buried under stacks of old newspapers. Every time a car drove down his street, Elias found himself peeking through the blinds. On the third morning, it rained. A cold, gray drizzle that turned the world monochrome. Elias drove to a hardware store in Falls Church, purely to maintain the appearance of normalcy. When he came out, carrying a bag of nails he didn't need, he noticed a car parked across the lot. It was a dark blue Ford LTD. American-made, government issue. There was a man in the driver's seat reading a newspaper. It was a cliché, something out of a bad movie, but that didn't make it less terrifying. Elias got into his truck and drove away. He watched the rearview mirror. The Ford didn't follow him immediately. It waited a beat, then pulled out. Elias took a series of turns, weaving through residential streets. The Ford stayed 3 cars back. It wasn't aggressive, it was persistent. Elias's heart hammered. He was a bricklayer. He knew how to build a straight wall, how to mix cement. He did not know how to evade a tail. He panicked. He pulled into a busy shopping center, parked his truck, and walked briskly into a department store. He moved through the aisles of men's clothing, his work boots heavy on the tile floor, and exited through the loading dock at the back. He waited behind a dumpster for 20 minutes, shivering in the rain. No one came. Had he lost them? Or had they simply put a tracker on his truck? He didn't know if that technology existed for cars yet, but in his mind, the enemy was capable of anything. He walked back to his truck. The Ford was gone. But when he unlocked his door, he noticed something. The glove box was slightly ajar. He had locked the truck. He was sure of it. He checked the contents. His registration was there. His maps were there. But the receipt for the deli in McLean, the one he had thrown on the dashboard 3 days ago, was gone. They knew he had been in McLean. They knew he had been at the house. And now they were checking to see who he was. Elias realized then that he couldn't hide. If he did nothing, they would come for him eventually. He had to go on the offensive, in the only way a layman could. He had to find out what Vance had really known. He drove to the public library in Alexandria. He took the ledger with him, tucked inside his jacket. He found a secluded table in the back, surrounded by stacks of reference books. He opened the ledger to the page with the coordinates. He cross-referenced them with a detailed atlas of the DC area. Most were locations in the city, parks, intersections, monuments, dead drops. But the last entry, dated February 12th, 2 days before the disappearance, was different. 38-8921 N 77.0543 W. Note: the exchange, 0300 hours. Elias traced the coordinates. It wasn't a park. It wasn't a street corner. It was a specific location along the Potomac River, near the old power plant, a desolate stretch of industrial waterfront. Why there? And what was the exchange? Chapter 6. The Impossibility of Innocence. Elias returned home to a phone that was ringing. He stared at it. It was a rotary phone on the kitchen wall, a beige appliance that suddenly looked like a weapon. He let it ring, 4 times, 5 times. It stopped. Then it started again immediately. He picked it up, saying nothing. "Mr. Thorne," a voice said. It was smooth, bureaucratic, and utterly devoid of warmth. "This is Mr. Sterling from the bank, regarding the Chain Bridge property." Elias exhaled, his knees going weak. "Yes, the stone. I'm sourcing the stone." "We've had a change of plans," the voice said. "The sale has been expedited. We need the keys returned. Today. The repairs are no longer necessary. The new buyer will handle the renovations." I have tools there," Elias stammered. "Your tools have been collected and are waiting for you at our office in DC," Mr. Sterling said. "Do not return to the property, Mr. Thorne. It is now private property. Do you understand?" "I understand." "Good. And, Mr. Thorne, we trust you found everything in order." The question hung in the air. It was a test. "Just dust and broken stone," Elias said, gripping the phone cord. "Excellent," the voice said. "We appreciate your discretion." The line went dead. Elias hung up. They knew. They suspected he had found something, or they were just being cautious. But Mr. Sterling wasn't a banker. Bankers didn't collect a contractor's tools. Elias went to the basement. He looked at the box. He had to get rid of it, but he couldn't just throw it in the river. If Vance was right, if the rot was higher up, then destroying this evidence might be destroying the only thing that could save the Vance family, wherever they were. Or, more selfishly, the only thing that could save Elias. If he handed it over to the CIA and they were the ones who betrayed Vance, Elias would disappear. If he handed it to the police, the CIA would take it from them. He needed leverage. He needed to understand the last piece of the puzzle. He picked up the ledger again. He looked at the final entry, the exchange. He remembered the date, February 14th, Valentine's Day. He went to the library archives the next morning, pulling the microfiche for the Washington Post from February 1979. He scanned the headlines for the days following the 14th. President Carter talks energy crisis. Snowstorm hits the Midwest. Local accident on George Washington Parkway. He paused. A small article on page B4. Unidentified man found in river. Police recovered the body of a man from the Potomac near the power plant. No identification. Accidental drowning suspected. Elias read the description. Male, approx 40 years old, wearing a gray suit. Jonathan Vance was 41. Elias felt a sick sensation in his stomach. Vance hadn't gone to Switzerland. He hadn't defected to Moscow. He had gone to the river for the exchange, and he had ended up in the water. But if Vance was dead, where were Sarah and the children? The article mentioned no other bodies. Elias looked back at the ledger. There was one more note, scribbled on the inside back cover, so faint he had missed it the first time. It was a phone number, and a single word, Safe House. The number had a Maryland area code. Elias Thorne, the bricklayer who just wanted to fix a fireplace, now held the location of a missing family in his hands. And the people who had killed the father were undoubtedly looking for the wife and children too. If they hadn't found them yet, it was because Sarah Vance was smarter than her husband. She hadn't gone to the river. Elias stood up. He wasn't a spy, but he was a man who protected his own home. And now, he felt a strange, terrifying responsibility to protect the remnants of this one. He walked to the payphone in the library lobby. He had a pocket full of quarters and a decision to make. Chapter 7. The Voice on the Wire. The payphone in the library lobby smelled of stale tobacco and cheap sanitizer. Elias dropped a quarter into the slot, the metallic clink echoing like a gunshot in the quiet vestibule. He dialed the number from the back of the ledger. His hand shook slightly. He told himself he was just checking to see if the line was active. If it was dead, he would walk away. He would burn the box and go back to laying bricks. The line rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Elias was about to hang up when a click signaled the connection. There was no greeting, just the hollow, open sound of a room somewhere in Maryland. "Hello?" Elias said, his voice dropping an octave. Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. A woman's voice, barely a whisper. "Who is this?" I found the box," Elias said. He didn't know what else to say. In the stone, the fireplace. The silence on the other end stretched for 5 agonizing seconds. He could hear a television playing cartoons in the background, the low murmur of a fictional world. "Code," the woman said. Her voice was steel, wrapped in terror. "What is the code on the envelope?" Elias fumbled with the ledger in his pocket, visualizing the manila envelope in his basement. There was no code written on it, just a red wax seal. But inside, the list, Petrov. "Oh God," the woman breathed. It was Sarah Vance. It had to be. Is Jonathan with you?" Elias closed his eyes. He couldn't tell her. Not over the phone. Not like this. "No, ma'am. I'm a mason. I was fixing the wall." "Listen to me carefully," she said, the steel returning to her voice. "Do not go home. Do not go to the police. If you found that box, they know the seal is broken. They have sensors, passive triggers." Jonathan was paranoid. "Sensors?" Elias looked around the library lobby, suddenly feeling exposed. "You need to bring it to me," she said. "It's the only way to stop them from coming for you. And it's the only way I can trade for our lives." "Trade with who?" "With the people who employ my husband, or the people who killed him. I don't know the difference anymore." She gave him an address, not a house, but a diner off a highway in rural Maryland. 2 hours. If you aren't there, I'm leaving, and you're on your own." The line went dead. Chapter 8. The Crossing. Elias ran to his truck. He drove to his house, parking down the street. He didn't pull into the driveway. Sarah's warning about sensors stuck in his mind. Had he triggered something when he pulled the stone? Was that why the banker had called? He entered his house through the back cellar door, moving quickly. He grabbed the metal box, the tapes, the ledger. He shoved them into a nondescript gym bag. He grabbed his own shotgun, a dusty 12-gauge he kept for home defense, and wrapped it in a blanket, putting it on the floor of the truck. He drove north, avoiding the major highways. He took the back roads through the Maryland countryside, watching the farm fields roll by in the gray light. He felt ridiculous. He was a 50-year-old man in work boots playing at espionage. But the fear in his gut was real. He arrived at the diner, the Rusty Spoon, 20 minutes early. It was a chrome and neon relic sitting alone on a stretch of 2-lane blacktop. He parked in the back near the dumpsters and waited. At the appointed time, a station wagon pulled into the lot. It was battered, muddy, unrecognizable as the vehicle of a diplomat's wife. A woman stepped out. She wore a headscarf and sunglasses despite the overcast sky. She looked tired, her posture slumped, but her movements were sharp. Elias got out of his truck, holding the gym bag. He approached her slowly. "Mrs. Vance?" She lowered her sunglasses. Her eyes were rimmed with red, but they were alert. "Show me." He unzipped the bag. She looked at the green metal box and let out a sob that she quickly swallowed. He really did it. The idiot. "He wrote about a lifeboat," Elias said. "He wanted to get you out. He wanted to be a hero," Sarah said bitterly. "He was working for the CIA, Elias. But the KGB got their hooks in him 3 years ago. Blackmail. They had photos of things Jonathan did that he shouldn't have. He tried to play double agent without telling Langley. He thought he could outsmart both sides." "The ledger?" Elias asked. "What is it?" "It's the proof," she said. "Not just of his treason, but of theirs. He documented every order the KGB gave him, and every time the CIA missed it. It proves incompetence at the highest levels of Langley. If this gets out, heads roll, careers end. That's why the CIA wants it buried. That's why the KGB wants it destroyed." "And Jonathan?" Elias asked gently. She looked away toward the highway. "I haven't heard from him in 8 months. I knew he was gone. I needed to know he didn't run off and leave us." "He didn't run," Elias said. "He went to the exchange to buy your freedom." Sarah nodded, tears finally spilling over. "He kept us hidden, me and the kids, moving every month, living on cash, waiting for him to come for us, but he never came." Chapter 9. The Siege at the Rusty Spoon. The conversation was cut short by the sound of tires on gravel. Fast. Elias and Sarah turned. A black sedan screeched into the parking lot, blocking the exit. 2 men in trench coats stepped out. They didn't look like police. They looked like the men Mrs. Gable had described. The sweepers. "Get inside!" Elias yelled, shoving Sarah toward the diner. They scrambled through the back door into the kitchen. The cook, a large man named Al, looked up from the grill, spatula in hand. "Hey, customers out front! Call the police!" Elias shouted. "State troopers!" The back door kicked open. One of the men entered, a silenced pistol in his hand. This wasn't an arrest. This was a liquidation. Elias didn't think. He swung the gym bag, heavy with the metal box and the ledger, into the man's face. The metal clanged against bone. The man stumbled back, his gun firing a puff of compressed air into the ceiling. "Move!" Elias grabbed Sarah's arm and dragged her through the kitchen into the dining area. The few patrons were screaming now. Elias overturned a table, pushing Sarah behind it. "My truck," Elias gasped. "I have a shotgun." "It's too far," Sarah said, clutching the ledger to her chest. The second man was coming through the front door. The diner was a kill box. "The freezer!" Al the cook shouted, realizing the situation wasn't a robbery but something worse. He pointed to the walk-in cooler. Elias and Sarah ran for it. They slammed the heavy insulated door shut and threw the latch just as bullets shattered the glass of the pie display case. Inside the freezer, amidst hanging sides of beef and crates of lettuce, the cold was instant and biting. "There's no back way out," Sarah whispered, her breath visible in the air. "We're trapped." "They can't shoot through these walls," Elias said, examining the thick steel door. "But they can wait us out." "They won't wait," Sarah said. "They'll burn the place down. It's cleaner." Elias looked at the metal box in his hands. "The cause of all this. We have to open it. Is there anything else in here? A weapon?" Sarah shook her head. "Just information. Information is only useful if someone is listening." Elias looked at the ventilation fan high up on the wall. It was small, but maybe. "Give me the tapes," Elias said. Chapter 10. The Broadcast. "What?" Sarah asked. "The tapes, the reel-to-reel." Elias was looking at the fan motor. He wasn't an electrician, but he knew motors. He knew power. "The diner. Does it have a PA system? For music?" "I don't know." Elias scrambled up on a crate of milk. He began tearing at the housing of the fan. "If I can short the fan, I can trip the breaker. Or, no." He stopped. That was stupid. He needed to get the information out. "We need to make noise," Elias said. Loud noise. Outside, the gunfire had stopped. The men were likely setting a fire or preparing to breach the door with explosives. Suddenly, sirens wailed in the distance. Real sirens. State troopers. The cook, Al, must have actually called them before ducking. "They're leaving," Sarah said, pressing her ear to the door. "They can't be seen by the police." Elias didn't relax. "Or they'll pose as federal agents and take custody of us." That was the real danger. If the local police handed them over to the feds, and the feds were the ones trying to kill them, they were dead. "We need a witness," Sarah said. "A real one. Someone who can't be silenced." The freezer door handle turned. Elias tensed, ready to swing the box again. "State police," a voice boomed. "Come out with your hands up." Elias opened the door slowly. 3 troopers stood there, guns drawn. Behind them, the diner was a wreck of shattered glass and terrified patrons. "Don't let them take us," Sarah screamed at the troopers. "We are witnesses to a federal crime. We demand protective custody under state jurisdiction." It was a bluff, but it worked. The troopers, confused and seeing a terrified woman and a bricklayer, handcuffed them but put them in the back of a squad car, not a black sedan. Chapter 11. The Interrogation of Elias Thorne. They were taken to a county jail, not a black site. For 3 hours, Elias sat in a holding cell, still wearing his dusty work clothes. He had been separated from Sarah. Finally, the door opened. A man walked in. He wasn't a trooper. He was older, wearing a cheap suit and a weary expression. He carried a briefcase. "Mr. Thorne," the man said, "my name is Agent Miller, FBI." Elias didn't speak. "We have Mrs. Vance," Miller said. "She's safe. She's telling us quite a story, about a chimney and a box." "I was just doing a job," Elias said. "You were," Miller agreed. "And you stumbled into the middle of Operation Azure. Do you know how lucky you are to be alive?" "I don't feel lucky." Miller sat down. "The men at the diner? They weren't ours. They were KGB contractors. The sweepers Mrs. Gable saw, those were ours. We were looking for the box for 6 months. We tore that house apart. We never checked inside the masonry. Because you don't know stone," Elias said simply. Miller smiled, a dry, humorless expression. "Touché. Here is the situation, Elias. The ledger proves that Jonathan Vance was a double agent. It also proves that he was trying to come back to the fold. The people trying to kill you, Petrov's network, wanted to destroy that proof so they could claim Vance was a loyal Soviet asset. It's a propaganda war." "And the CIA?" Elias asked. "Sarah said you guys have a leak. That's why he hid it." Miller's face hardened. "That is a matter of internal security. The leak has been plugged, largely thanks to the list in that box. So, what happens now?" Sarah Vance and her children enter the Witness Protection Program. They get new names, a new life, far away from here. And Jonathan? His body was recovered. He will be buried with honors. Quiet honors, but honors nonetheless. And me? Elias asked. Miller opened his briefcase. He pulled out a document. This is a national security non-disclosure agreement. You will sign it. You will never speak of the Vances, the box, or the diner. In exchange, the FBI will forget you stole evidence from a federal crime scene, and we will ensure that Petrov's network knows you are of no further value. You go back to being a bricklayer. Chapter 12, The Mortar of Memory. Elias signed the paper. There was no other choice. They drove him back to his truck, which had been towed to the police impound. They gave him his keys. Elias went back to work. He finished the job on the Chain Bridge house, or rather a new crew did after the investigation closed. The house was sold to a young couple from Ohio who had no idea that a man had died for the secrets hidden in their chimney. Elias never saw Sarah Vance again. Years passed. The Cold War thawed, then shattered with the Berlin Wall. The secrets of 1979 became footnotes in history books, but Elias kept one thing. On that day in the freezer, before the police opened the door, he had slipped something out of the box and into his boot. It wasn't a document, it was a photograph. A picture of Jonathan, Sarah, and their kids at a beach, smiling, squinting in the sun. It was the only proof Elias had that they had been a real family, not just pawns in a game of chess. Elias grew old. He retired. He sat on his porch in Alexandria, watching the world change. He watched the news about spies and defectors, about poisonings and cyber warfare. He often thought about the nature of his work. A bricklayer builds things to last. He uses stone and mortar to create permanence. But the spy world was built on sand, lies, covers, disappearing families. It was a world where nothing was solid, where a father could vanish into a river and a mother could turn into a ghost. Elias looked at the brick wall of his own garden, a wall he had built with his own hands. It was strong. It was true. He realized then that he was the only one who knew the real story. The official records would be redacted. The files would be shredded. But he remembered. He was the living mortar, holding the truth together. And sometimes in the quiet of the evening, he would raise a glass of whiskey to the empty air and whisper, "Safe travels, Mrs. Vance. Safe travels."